We live in a very, very critical time period where holding on to your faith is more difficult than holding a burning coal. Every time, out of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you turn your head away from this trap of the shaitan and you don't indulge into your desires and to the lust, patience, only for the sake of Allah. You fear Allah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم سبحانك لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي أما بعد. In a khutbah, I listened to an imam that once said, there are two time periods where the most walis, the most awliyas, which means the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares you to be a wali, you become his beloved friend. He says there's two time periods where one can attain this level with the easiest way possible. The first time period would be, what do you guys think? The Sahaba's time. The Sahaba's time is the first time period where everybody, nearly everybody probably, was declared to be a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why we say radiyallahu an when we talk about the Sahabas. Why is that? Because they were illuminated with the nur of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Sitting in his congregation, learning about their iman, learning about Islam, and being brushed by the words of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, put them to a whole new level. And they were very committed. They were very committed to this da'wah and to this mission. In fact, one of the Sahabas, his name is Hanza bin Rabi al-Asadi, radiyallahu an. He goes to Abu Bakr radiyallahu an and says, Ya Abu Bakr, I think I've become a munafiq, a hypocrite. And Abu Bakr radiyallahu an says, what are you talking about? Well, why is that? And he says, Ya Abu Bakr, when I go to the congregations, when I'm with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and when he talks about heaven and hell, all I'm thinking about is afterlife. I have nothing about this world that's crossing through my mind. It's as if I'm seeing paradise, as if I'm seeing hell, and I'm God conscious. The moment I leave the Prophet ﷺ's congregation, and when I go back to my wife and my kids and to my businesses, I find myself to be not thinking about it as much. I'm more indulged within this world. I think I've become a munafiq. Look at the worries these Sahabas had back then. And this kind of sensitivity put them into the level of awliya. They were declared to be the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in a clear hadith, Rasulullah ﷺ teaches us that when a person is loved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares it to Jibreel alayhi salam, saying, I love fulan. I love fulan, and so Ya Jibreel, you love him too, you love her too. And Jibreel alayhi salam says, Ya Rabbi, I love him as well, I love her as well, whatever it may be. And Jibreel alayhi salam goes to the samawat, malaik, all the other angels and all the other creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and says, our Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, loves this man, this woman, and I love him as well, or her as well, so you all love him and her as well. And the samawat, the Ahl samawat, they all declare their love for this one person as well. And you know how this reflects onto a universe? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts a warm feeling in people's hearts about that person, about that individual. Positive thought about this person. And that is when you're declared the wali, a friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the first time period when it's the easiest to become a wali. What's the second time period? What do you think it's? In today's generation. In today's generation, it's the easiest to become a wali. Why is that? Because we are surrounded with so much fitna, so much of the traps of the shaitan. And it's very accessible. We have every opportunity to fall into the fitna that the shaitan brings forth. Our desires sometimes get the best of us. And it's incredibly terrible because you're not only influenced with this fitna outside of your house, but it's also within your house as well. Kids start to get exposed to this kind of fitna at a very young age. With the shows, with the movies that they watch, the cell phones, the laptops, the iPads that they have. Everything's very accessible. And we live in a very, very critical time period where holding on to your faith is more difficult than holding a burning coal, as the hadith says. Right? In today's time period, as this Imam was saying, the scholar was saying, it's easier because with all the accessibility around you, with all the fitna around you, every time out of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you turn your head away from this specific type of fitna, from this trap of the shaitan, and you don't indulge into your desires and to the lust, and you're patient only for the sake of Allah. You fear Allah. For instance, there's this situation where you're gonna come across a person that you're not supposed to look at. You have to lower your gaze, but your desires, your nafs, burning up within you, and it's trying to pull you into that trap of the shaitan. And maybe sometimes you think to yourself, this is only a one-time thing. This is an innocent situation. I'm not harming anyone. Shaitan uses all types of traps to get into your head, anything possible. But out of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with your God consciousness, you turn your head away, and you have no idea how you're being raised above the ranks. And you could be quickly moved to the ranks of the Walis, of the Awliya in this generation. It's a risk factor situation. In economics, there is this idea called the risk factor. Basically, if you invest into something, a stock that's very risky, either you're gonna get a big return from it, or you're gonna get a very small return from it. You could lose everything in a riskier stock, for instance, if you're investing. You could lose everything, or you could gain everything. Now, we live in a situation like that in today's society, brothers and sisters. We live in that kind of situation. Take this opportunity and fly to the soar above the ranks and become the walis of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the thing about this generation is sometimes we overlook sins. We don't think of them to be very, very great, very major. We have some understanding of sins for some reason sometimes, and we say, this is a small, minor sin and this is a major sin. Well, yes, there's definitions about this, but this doesn't give you the credibility, the opportunity to say, this is a small, minor sin, I could commit it. That can't be the thought process that's going inside your head, because every little sin leads to a greater sin. Every step that you take within sin can lead to kufr, to disbelief. And inshallah, in the future videos, we could dive deeper into this one sentence, because this one sentence is very important. Every step that you take that's sinful is a gateway for the shaitan. All he needs is to put his foot in the door. Once he can crack that door open, the rest shall come. So you want to shut that door as tight as possible. You have to build the forts and the castles to protect yourselves from the weapons of the shaitan, because he's continuously in battle with you. He's continuously attacking you. Now, some of the fitna is very evident, very clearly set in our heads. For instance, if you ever have this kind of challenge with alcohol or eating pork, for instance, let's say, these are clearly forbidden. But sometimes shaitan will not approach you with this kind of stuff, but he'll be a little bit more sneaky. Especially if you're a Muslim trying to serve for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you're a mentor, for instance, you're taking care of students, you're spreading the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there will be times when shaitan will mess with you in a sneakier way. There's 6 strategies that the shaitan uses. 6 strategies. Out of the 6 strategies, we're going to talk about one of them today. And inshallah, in the future series to come, we could talk about the rest of the 5 strategies. The first strategy is one of the scariest, one of the sneakiest, and one of the most powerful strategies that shaitan uses, called Hub-e-Jah. Hub-e-Jah, Hub means love, Jah means status. A love for status. When one has a love for status, a love for fame, for attention, and self-advertisement, could easily fall into the traps of the shaitan, because you're not doing things for the sake of Allah anymore. Rather, you're just doing whatever you're doing to appeal others. The funny thing is, anyone that you're trying to draw the attention of, if I were trying to draw the attention of Ahmed here during this call, I'm purposefully just focusing on this man right here. I'm saying, I want this man to have some sort of thought about me. I want him to have such care and love for me. How long could he possibly live? 100 years. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is eternal. And all the time that I'm spending and all the energy that I'm putting forth just to appeal this guy right here is a waste, because he's not everlasting. Now, for that reason, chasing the rida, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the most important key factor that we have when serving for the sake of Allah. The most important asset that we have. Now, Hub-e-Jah could be very dangerous, guys. It could be very dangerous because it brings out some feelings of ambition and competition. And sometimes it becomes a way for you to actually not serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, for this da'wah. It becomes a reason for you to not serve, because you think to yourself, rather than me being a mentor, where I could, some people for some reason think that working with others, being an imam or something, is a lower status. They rather become the businessmen's, the richest people out there, because they love that status, that fame that comes with it. I'm not saying being a businessman is a bad thing or anything. Don't misunderstand. But sometimes people use this as a means to not serving this da'wah, because they say, I don't want to be dealing with this kind of stuff. They think all great about themselves. It becomes a blockade for them to take part in serving this mission, this da'wah. Now, another way the Shaytan uses Hub-e-Jah is when people do whatever that they do just for the sake of attention. Now, for instance, I'm here speaking about some khalaqa. And may Allah protect me from any kind of thought processes like this, but if I ever were to think to myself right here and say, whatever I'm doing right now, I'm doing it to draw people's attention. I'm just trying to look cool. If this is the thought process that's going inside my head, and may Allah protect me from this kind of thought process, all the possible hasanat that we could be getting is being lost because I'm not doing it for the sake of Allah. Now, Hub-e-Jah can sometimes turn into ambition where you start competing so much with the brothers and sisters around you that it turns into hasad. It turns into some sort of hate. And why this can be dangerous is because when you look into history, because of Hub-e-Jah, many problems within the Muslim community, within the ummah, came to rise. For example, you guys know how Husayn radiallahu anh was martyred? You guys know how the grandson of Prophet Muhammad was martyred. The grandson. He was martyred. He was killed by so-called Muslims. There was a huge fitna. Yazid was a man, the son of Muawiyah. Yazid was a man who loved fame, who had ambitions, who wanted power. And he wanted to take control of the Muslim community, of the Muslim world. He wanted to declare himself as the Khalifa. But look at how Umar radiallahu anh, how Ali radiallahu anh, how Uthman radiallahu anh, how Abu Bakr radiallahu anh lived their lives as Khalifas. Did they have some sort of passion for this status? When Abu Bakr radiallahu anh was asked, would you be the Khalifa? Can you lead? Can you be, technically being a Khalifa is being the king of the Muslims. When Abu Bakr radiallahu anh was asked this, he denied. He said, no, I can't do this. Umar radiallahu anh denied it. He didn't want to do this. And all those others, they didn't have any sort of desire for such fame. They didn't have any such desire for such, or passion for self-advertisements. That's why they were worthy for that position. They were not people of they were not a people of wealth. We're talking about the king of Muslims. Now Muawiyah's son, Yazid, he wanted to establish a dynasty. And whoever stood in his way, he was willing to butcher whoever it may be. He was ruthless. He was unfair. And he had a passion for power and status and fame. As a result, Husayn radiallahu anh, the son of Ali radiallahu anh, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was to be declared as a Khalifa as he was on his mission to go collect an army to go against Yazid, who was very ruthless, who was very unfair. He was attacked in Karbala by Yazid's army. It was so ruthless. They, for once, didn't even think to themselves that this is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's grandson. The passion for fame and power brings this monster out of you. They shot arrows towards them and they killed Husayn radiallahu anhu's little baby in his hands. Further know the discussion. It's very graphic, so I don't want to really get into the details of it, but Husayn radiallahu anhu was beheaded by Yazid. So-called Muslims, that's what they were declaring themselves as. And they thought that they were doing something for the sake of Allah. So the passion for fame, self-attention, for power, brings this monster out of you that you actually convince yourself that you're doing something good, even when you're killing the Prophet's grandson. And Husayn radiallahu anhu was just one of the victims of the history of the Muslims. Throughout history, unfortunately, whatever problems that we face with the Muslim world is because of the passion for power and status and wealth. And this becomes a blockade for us. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from any sort of self-love, self-attention, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from Hub-e-Jah, because it could be a very sneaky and a very evil way of living life. So be very careful with what goes inside your consciousness, with what goes inside your heart, because you are the ones that know what's inside you the best. And whatever your niyyah is, Allah will judge you upon that. Inshallah. May Allah protect us from the fitness of this world. Ameen.